pushed the magic button. So
You did it. Congratulations.
I knew you were going to help me anyway, so I wasn't worried, Frank. Thank you. In fact, that's the last thing Michelle said to me. It's like, be sure and record. And I said, Frank will remind me if I forget. Thanks, everybody. I know we have a hefty agenda. Grabbing some paper. So I appreciate everyone being here for our our special meeting of September at 4 p.m. And we have a lot going on. So that was my short but sweet welcome from everybody. We have, it doesn't appear that Michael Carey has joined us yet. So I guess I'll just move into the agenda as it is. First, we have scheduled project status, which typically Kurt will give us. And then we have some concerns that came out of our Hartford Avenue walk regarding some obstacles in the right-of-way. We need to make a final decision. Today, I think I sent it to you. We received the proposal from BSC to take on the municipal grant requirements. And we look forward to talking about that. And then we are going to talk about, hopefully our attorney will join us, some of the issues that have come up with the excellent review by our town attorney on our project manual.
Mary Jo, I'm here.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm sorry I was a little late.
No, that's great. That's good. Thank you. I see you as call-in user 2, I think. I'm going to rename you, so I've got you here. Thank you. All right. And Bonnie, I can't see you, but I see that you're here. Can you hear us? Can't hear you either.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Eric. I got a note from Bonnie that she's trying to see if we can see her, and we cannot.
Mary Jo, are you going to be able to maybe put Michael on first?
Yes, that's my desire, but I want to make sure Bonnie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give Bonnie, she's going to try again. She's going to log off and come back in. So if you don't mind, if we could go ahead, Kurt, with just the schedule update, and then hopefully Bonnie can join us.
Yeah, and I will share my screen. Okay, I know the schedule is a little busy, so I'm going to actually try to blow it up as much as I can. Whoops. Okay. It's a little bit longer than previous ones. So the red arrow and line indicate where we are today, September 15th. As you can see, we are in final design. Essentially, I've extended the final design period, sort of stretched the schedule, if you will. I have indicated with the green square, our public informational meeting, that is to be determined. So that's something that we can contemplate today, and then make it as an action item now that we are very close to wrapping up the design. I think that's something worthwhile of getting on the calendar. You can see that I have us going out to bid November 1st, which just considering the fact that we're working out some of the prevailing wage issues, we've pretty much completed all the design work. We're just kind of fine tuning things now. And then coupled with DOT's review, I thought that was a reasonable expectation at this point. It could be plus or minus, of course, The good news is we've maintained the same bidding period that we've always had. And with the spring start, essentially that March 1st date, you can see we still have a gap in January, February. So we can use that to accommodate schedule slippage. So that's a very good thing. So as far as schedule is, we're in good shape. We have that gap available to us if anything slips, and we'll continue to wrap up the design. Like I said, we're in pretty close shape. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But schedule-wise, I think we're in a good spot right now. And if there's no questions, I'll just stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Mary Jo.
Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
We have our town attorney, Michael Carey, who's been kind enough to join us. So I was hoping we could just skip down under our current agenda item, which is project updates, to the project manual review status and bid planning. When we got the draft project manual, which you all received the end of July, Michael received a copy too. And mid-August, we got his updates. And one of the questions he had was regarding our statement in the document that the project is not subject to prevailing wage. So Frank and I asked him to look into that, and Frank and I had a call. We talked with some neighboring communities that have community connectivity grants, and we talked with Kurt. And, you know, we kind of think that we have an expert, which is our town attorney on this. He's drafted a memo, and which you all received for a review, to go to the Department of Labor and ask for a ruling on this. Little background, after I got the town attorney's question, I did go to the DOT to ask for some clarification, because as you all know, we've gone from the beginning, we've believed that our project was not subject to prevailing wage because it's new construction. It's under $1 million. It's not a renovation. So I was surprised. The response from DOT was, well, most of the projects we've received are renovation and therefore fall under prevailing wage. And I responded that I think we need some more feedback. And that's when I went out to ask for our town attorney's help. And Frank and I and Kurt all believe we have a defensible story, but Michael has prepared the memo that you received for our input before he goes out to the Department of Labor. And Tim, I think we kept you in the loop on that also. So Mike, do you want to talk about your memo? I looked at it, it looked fine. Any committee, any comment from you, and then I'll open up to the committee.
Well, the primary reason I asked you all to take a look at it is I don't want to represent anything to the contact at DOL that turns out not to be true. And I don't have all the facts. So I just wanted, what I did here was piece together something I got from Mary Jo, something from Kurt, and I think there was something out, there was a third thing that I used. So again, that's my main concern, and that's why I thought it would be helpful to have the committee look at this, just to be sure I don't make any factual misrepresentations by accident or on purpose.
Thank you. Has everyone gotten it, or do you want me just to read it? Would that be helpful, people?
Yeah, I've read through it too. I mean, I have only one comment, but and that's really in your closing paragraph, Mike. We talk about a community connectivity grant to provide new, not renovated sidewalks. I just add the word new construction, so reinforcing the whole idea that it's new construction. So it's new construction, not renovated sidewalks. So just add the word construction.
Which paragraph are you on, please?
That's the very, very final paragraph, your summary paragraph. And I think it may occur elsewhere throughout the piece, but I'm just looking to reinforce the fact that it's new construction. So wherever that's appropriate.
Okay, so we say something like newly constructed sidewalks or? All right,
Mm-mm.
New
I'll think of
construction.
a way to,
Yeah.
to change that, to make it more, make it stand out more.
I'm going to interrupt you, Mary Jo. I thought you were going to, probably best off to read it so everybody can hear it, I guess.
Okay.
I was talking to Mike on another matter, and he indicated in some instances, if a new sidewalk is being installed where there is no sidewalk but attaches to an existing sidewalk, that might poison it. So we may want to make sure that we say in our letter that the sidewalk, neither one attaches to an existing sidewalk on either end, which would take away that link perhaps.
Yeah, I think at some point talk about a terminus of the sidewalk at Bocce Lane. Put that in there at all.
There's nothing there, right, Frank? There's no sidewalk.
There is no sidewalk. In the letter, it talks about, let's see, right location.
No, I'll just read. The town of Old Lyme is about to go to bid for a contractor to construct new sidewalks in areas of town in which there are currently no sidewalks. The question has arisen whether the project is subject to prevailing wage requirements under e.g. Connecticut General Statutes 31-53H1A. Prevailing wages not required, quote, where the combined total cost of total bond authorization for all work to be performed by contractors and subcontractors, this is in italics, in connection with new construction of any public works project is less than $1 million. Town submits that prevailing wages do not apply to this project because it must be considered new construction in italics, and its total cost will be far below $1 million, but requests confirmation of DOL's position before issuing a request for bids. The town has obtained a grant from ConnDOT in the amount of $400,000. It is just $400,000, Michael, as part of the ConnDOT's Community Connectivity Grant Program to fund the project. The town considers this to be primarily a safety project, as it is designed to provide new sidewalks where none currently exist for pedestrians to safely access the Soundview Gateway area and local business. The new ADA sidewalk construction on Hartford Avenue will be approximately 970 feet in length and installed on the west side of the road from Bocce Road. In parentheses, there is no sidewalk at this corner, only grass, close parens, north to 156 Shaw Road. This area is primarily residential. Pedestrians going to the town beach currently must walk on this well-trafficked road or on a narrow budding grass strips, often with baby carriages and beach gear. The new ADA sidewalk on Route 156 Shore Road will be approximately 1,300 feet in length between Old Colony Road and Cross Lane. The new ADA sidewalk construction is planned to start at Cross Lane and extend east to Old Colony Road. This area consists of residences and popular local business establishments and terminates at the police department. However, there's currently no sidewalk along this stretch of busy Shore Road. The small piece of ADA sidewalk planned on the southwest corner of Shore Road at Hartford Avenue will provide safe pedestrian passage at the business located there. There is no existing sidewalk on Hartford Avenue or Shore Road at this corner. Pedestrians currently walk on the road to avoid the car traffic at this corner. In summary, the town is planning to use the Community Connectivity Grant to provide new construction, not renovated sidewalks and related safety enhancements for visitors to Old Lyme's Soundview Gateway.
Yeah, I think the thing I was thinking about was actually in the bid document, so.
Okay.
Don't forget about that. Read so much, forgot where it came from. The only thing I would say is that actually, I think that portion of road at the police department is technically Soundview Avenue, not Old Colony Road, so we might want to use the word Soundview Avenue because that's the way it lists on the town records.
Kurt, what do we have on our graphic going with this?
So if I understand the question, the official name of, I just want to make sure that I'm giving the right information.
That little section of road that is it by the police station,
Oh, yes.
okay, that goes from Route 156 to the railroad tracks, that section of road is Soundview Avenue, not
Okay,
Old Colony Road.
And I can confirm that. All right, interesting. So I'm looking at what I think is an image from, it's either Google Earth, it calls it Old Colony Road. But the town mapping would prevail, would dominate, right? So we can establish a name based on town mapping as, what did you say it was, Frank?
It's Soundview Avenue.
Okay.
Would
So
it be smart to go AKA or something like that?
you could, and we run into this every once in a while where some of these street names are 100 years old and they've gone through a couple of iterations. And so, yeah, that way, in case someone does think of it as Old Colony, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, Soundview Avenue, AKA Old Colony Extension or whatever.
There you go. Yep. Kind of similar to when people talk about Route 156, AKA Shore Road.
Yeah.
Kurt,
Yes.
right now I plan to send the contact, the plan that you forwarded to me.
Okay.
And I think it would probably help her if the street names in the memo match the street names on the plan.
Yeah, I can certainly revise those to mirror the memo.
Okay.
I can do that very quickly.
Will you send that to me?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Kurt, have you had any experience with this and any other instances where new sidewalks are trying to group them with with prevailing wage?
You know, it's interesting. I haven't, probably because the projects were small enough in scale or large enough in scale or clearly one way or another. This is a situation where my personal feeling, and for what that's worth, is that this is new construction. But it's I think this is a situation where the regulations almost haven't necessarily caught up with the evolution of projects and those kinds of things. So I think in my opinion, we're not necessarily even in a gray area. Rather, it's a matter of the regulatory interpretation.
But if there are no sidewalks to be attached to or no pre-existing, how could it be debatable?
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And that's why I think my worry, as I've expressed, is if we forge ahead and make the assumption that it is not, there exists the potential for the Department of Labor to come back and say, well, no, our interpretation is that it was prevailing wage, and then we're in a pickle.
Well, I don't think we want to contradict what they say, but if they were to try to come back, we should really vigorously argue, because what do you think the delta would be between one and the other for this project? How much would we lose because of prevailing wage?
Yep.
50%.
Yeah, great question. We have typically seen percentages that range from 30 to 40% higher when it's prevailing wage.
That's going to be a lot less sidewalk somewhere.
That's
We,
the question, Tim. Yeah.
yeah, we
We're trying
discussed
to
that.
get as much sidewalk as we can with the grant.
We discussed that the Department of Transportation reviews the bid packet prior to going out, and they review it for technical deficiencies or contractual technical deficiencies. Am I correct? Kurt?
That is correct.
So if we, I mean, and this is a question for Mike, and we had this discussion earlier, but Mike, we submit the package based on non-prevailing wage. It goes to the Department of Transportation. They reviewed it for contractual accuracy. They approve it. We go out. How could the Department of Labor come back after the fact and say, "Whoa, wait a second, you're wrong"? They would have to come
They
back
will.
to the department.
They
think the way the process works, DOL has the ultimate authority, and so you rely on the contracting agency at your own risk.
I would agree with that, Mike.
Can I add one thing here? The DOL has not said anything to me one way or the other about whether prevailing wages will apply here. The person I spoke with, what she did say was that generally or always, when they have a sidewalk project, if the new sidewalk connects with an old sidewalk, even if you don't touch any of the old sidewalk, they consider that to be rehab, repair, maintenance, and subject to the lower cap. So, but I didn't tell her whether this sidewalk connects with any other sidewalk because, frankly, I didn't really know when I talked to her. But I think we can, if from what you're saying here, the memo I sent her should maybe be a little stronger that
Yes.
this sidewalk is not connecting with any existing sidewalk. Am I right, though, that would it also be right to say that no existing sidewalks or curbing or anything else that already exists is going to be changed as part of this project?
No, we are going to put in new curbing, new existing curbing. The old curbing on Hartford Avenue, for example, is being taken out. New curbing will be replaced. In some cases, existing crosswalks that don't get people to anywhere will be putting in new crosswalks.
Well, the curbing, Mike, is going to be, it will be a replacement of existing curbing to accommodate the new sidewalk. So we're not changing the roadway, so to speak. We're just changing some of the curbing configuration for.
How much, out of 400K, how much is the curbing going to cost?
I can tell you.
My guess, I'm thinking it's probably a very small percentage of the total project.
It is a small percentage. So as an example, just to kind of frame it out, on Shore Road, virtually none of the curbing is being replaced by design. We're trying not to touch it. On Hartford Avenue, the entirety of the curb is being replaced. And that's merely because we know that there's going to be curb cuts and that it will probably get damaged during construction. To be quite honest with you, if that became a deciding factor,
yeah,
we theoretically could save the curb and have the contractor work around it.
Well, it's kind of a reach to say curbing's the same as sidewalk, isn't it?
Well, in this
well,
particular case,
I think the determination under the statute comes down to the overall work that's going to be performed and whether any of that work constitutes repair, replacement, maintenance. So I don't think that the department looks at this on some kind of a balanced scale to say 99% of the project is obviously new construction, so Davis-Bacon doesn't apply. My guess is they're going to, from the tone that I had with the person I spoke with, which was friendly, but my sense was that they look to apply, their default position is to apply prevailing wages whenever they think they can.
Work around the curbing issue then. It's so minimal.
Well, we don't have to mention it unless we're asked to mention it.
Yeah, that's true.
Currently, the memo just speaks to sidewalks and
Which is really what it is. It's sidewalks. Let's just stick to the memo. It's new construction of new sidewalks where there are none existing, and we'll just leave it at that. That's a pretty black and white situation. If the Department of Labor wants to take a different understanding, then I would think that would be quite a precedent that could affect quite a variety of communities that work under the assumption that new construction is new construction.
And in fact, Carl Fortuna, when he and I spoke, thought this was a good question to resolve his reading of the grant guidelines. He felt it was gray, and he felt his grant for a section of new sidewalk or area where there hasn't been any sidewalk falls into the same situation we are. He's working with a different engineer who basically told him that they were going to go out for prevailing wage. And then he said, after our discussion, he was going to go back and talk to them about it. I haven't heard back from him. But, you know, he basically agreed that what municipalities are trying to do is get more sidewalk for the buck, and that in areas where there is no existing sidewalk, that a reasonable person would think that's new construction. Kurt, on the diagram that is going out with it, does it talk about the curbing?
The plan sheets do show the curbing replacements. So if somebody really studied the sheets, it is on there to remove, and then it indicates new curbing.
So would the aprons be on there?
The aprons are on there. The new driveway aprons are on there.
Yeah.
Well, those are also new construction because there presently are no driveway aprons, so to speak, just gravel. Is the sidewalk south of Bocce Lane on there?
The plan set actually, the way that we have it divided, it actually cuts off at Bocce Lane. So
Okay.
all we're showing is the new crosswalk that goes across Bocce Lane, and then our new sidewalk. So we don't show any existing
That would make sense.
construction on the other side.
That would make sense.
So any other suggestions for Mike on the memo? Anything we want to strengthen? Mike, do you have any other thoughts, questions for us?
No, I don't.
Okay, I would like the committee just to make sure that they're in agreement that Michael will take this action.
Do we need a form of motion on that, Mary Jo, or just a consensus?
I think I'd like a motion.
I'd like to make the motion that we allow Attorney Carey to proceed with memo with the changes we discussed, and Kurt to make the necessary changes in the plans, and get a ruling from Department of Labor, and as Tim suggested, vigorously establish our position.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Thank you. Any abstentions? Any nays? It's unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you, Michael.
All right, want me to go?
You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure
Now
you'll.
push the meter down.
Oh,
Yeah,
never-
right.
Are you charging us by the hour, Mike? That's what I want to know. Tim wants to know that.
A minute.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
All right, thanks. It's nice talking with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you now.
Okay, night.
Good night. So while we're on the subject, Michael's review of the draft contract and project manual really went very well. The comments, I didn't get any from the committee, but other than Frank's about considering bid being, what do we call that bit? Not an alternate deduct. That's the only thing. Yeah. So a lot of the questions were easily handled. Kurt's making those revisions. So the other issue was our insurance chart that we usually put in our contractors' requirements. I finally contacted Kerma. They provided some language they'd like to see, and as soon as we get that revised, then they will review the guidelines just to make sure they're current. But subsequently, I saw at our Board of Selectmen meeting the contract guidelines for the sewer part of the sewer project. I guess it was in the easements, Tim, and they match our draft here. So I'm pretty confident that we'll be resolving that pretty darn soon. Okay, so those were our big things. Kurt, did you have anything you wanted to add on the bid?
Yeah, just very shortly, all of the revisions based on Michael's comments have been made, and all the documents were sent back to him last week. We had a couple of conversations. I think it's going to be very straightforward. I did a summary memo that matched his memo, so he could very easily find the changes. I described the changes I made, and then I also highlighted the changes in the document. Just, I know for getting a big document thrown at you, it can be pretty onerous. So I wanted to make it as efficient for him to find the changes. I also, at the same time, took the opportunity to convert the documents because we are now going out as a lump sum project. So all those changes are now in there. So the project manual, once we hear back from Michael, and I really don't anticipate many comments back, it's pretty close to being done. There were a few sections, I think 2, in fact, that he had made some suggestions that were a little bit open-ended. So we had talked to him and said, look, clearly I'm not an attorney. Because you're kind of just giving general suggestions, it's probably best then if you, Michael, write whatever you think is best. So he said, absolutely, I understand. Otherwise, I would take a shot at it, then send it to him. It would go back and forth a bunch of times. He could just do it once, then we know it's right.
He also provided us did someone have a comment? Sorry.
Yeah, no, the question I had, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring it up, when Mary Jo, you and I were talking to other towns, and I mentioned to Kurt what Coventry had done with the contractor in place program in terms of saving a considerable amount of money in their projects. I don't know if that works into how that works into this package. We're going out to bid, but we're going to be looking at that PAS contractor in place program as an alternative to actually going out to bid.
Yeah, and I guess if it's okay, I can speak to that. I actually sent Craig Babowitz an email asking about that. I found him to be very helpful. For example, when I asked him about the lump sum, he had data that other communities had done it. I've kind of posed the same question to him. One of the requirements of the Community Connectivity Grant Program is that any contractor being considered for the work must be Connecticut DOT certified. So I'm sure that there are contractors that are out there that are on the DAS list and are Connecticut DOT certified. So I'm sure that could be accommodated. But what I want to find out from him is that allowed under this program? Just so we want to know either way. So I'm waiting to hear back from him. Hopefully I'll have that information this week.
So to bring everybody up to speed on that, the conversation was with the town of Coventry, I think it was, where they use the existing DAS contractors, which have established rates in place. And the engineer I spoke to in Coventry and the town manager I spoke to in Coventry when we were researching this prevailing wage thing stated to me that they had saved a considerable amount of funding, a considerable amount of money going directly with a DAS contractor who has established rates. The town manager, John Seltzer, is telling me, in the order of 20 to 50% per ton in place of asphalt. He said he couldn't even buy the asphalt himself for what he was actually paying a contractor actually put it down. So there was a tremendous amount of savings with that particular program. So that's why I brought it up to Kurt and Mary Jo when we talked about it. And that may be another way of going about this route and getting as much as we can.
Yeah, I just did a quick look at the website, and I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure I understand it enough to really say it. To me, it looked like the same as the DAS program, so I'm not really sure what the specifics.
So hopefully Kurt will get some feedback from our.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the key. If he says, yes, it has been done, then that probably means he's got some information, and then we'll track that down and find out who did it. Maybe even have a conversation with that town if they did it for the connectivity grant program. If he says, no, we wouldn't allow that, at least we have a definitive answer and we move on.
Great.
So I'll report back as soon as I hear.
Okay.
Great.
And Jim has joined us. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Mary.
The only thing. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I know you're busy. I don't know exactly when you joined us, but we just had a discussion on the prevailing wage and approved our town attorney to send an informative and strong memo to DOL regarding our position. The other thing Michael sent us was a draft for a sidewalk easement for the sidewalk that's going to on the Easy Mart property. And our town clerk and assessor had done a nice job and determined that we don't really have anything existing there. So Kurt has put together a bid, which I sent you today, to finish the part that we need to make sure that that easement is done correctly and then can be approved part of the deed of the property. I hope I'm saying that right. So I guess we'll talk about the cost later, but I just wanted you guys to know that that's also underway. As far as the easement for the signage on the Shore Road portion, the placemaking discussion, I think I put that on our agenda somewhere there. Oh, just been below here. The discussion we had is that we think that the placemaking needs maybe further refinement. Right now we have the sign that's there already. Frank was kind enough to locate the license agreement for that signage. Tim noted that Cumberland Farms no longer is the owner, so maybe that isn't even valid anymore. Don't know. But if we're not really sure about the placement, what we want, and we're looking at a gateway placement, which could be maybe down by the police station on town property, by a transportation center, refine that, maybe part of another grant. I'm just wondering if we even want to concern ourselves with that discussion at this point. I'm throwing that out there.
Well, the signage at the top of Hartford Avenue always part of the project. I mean, looking at it as part of the police station or the property across the street from the church, where would you put it on the other side, coming in from the other direction, Mary Jo?
Well, I got to thinking about it when you talked about that rock that was found at the police station when they're doing. I mean,
The big rock, yeah.
Well, we had that discussion, you and Tim and I, about something attractive, utilizing that. And it kind of goes into our initial discussions. We really want something to signify that this is the gateway, not just, Soundview Beach. So my thought was, is it something we want to consider doing well and doing maybe with another grant, if we can, and deal with that on that property, because people are going to be stopping there, or they're getting on their bikes, or they're going to be picking up the bus there. Kind of makes sense that we would want some locator, some placemaking, to me.
Mary Jo, can I share my screen?
Oh, please.
I just had a fun little thing that I had put together that maybe a little inspiration or just food for thought. So we had talked about, I don't know if can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
So we were just, I talked to some of our planners and about the idea of the issue of placemaking and creating a district on a gateway. And they had suggested that, well, you want to define what is the area that you want to create and give an identity, if you will. So if you put the sign at the top of Hartford Avenue, that's fine. You would give essentially Hartford Avenue that identity, and that would basically be your, whatever you wanted to call it. They said if you wanted to look in more of a larger, and they said in light of the fact that you're adding sidewalks out there, clearly there's a desire to create something more that spreads out on 156. They said you may want to think about putting signs that create the quote unquote gateway in each direction along the lines of, hey, you are now entering the Soundview, whether you want to call it village district or those kinds of things. There is some existing zoning specific to the Soundview, so we could tie it in with that and create more of I'll use the word district, but a small little village area that includes not only Hartford Avenue, but that stretch of Route 156 Shore Road. So as you get the sidewalks in there, you hope that maybe businesses modify maybe some of their signs and those things. It could really set you up nice to have a little district in and of itself down there. So just some thoughts on kind of looking at a larger area and how does that play into sort of the whole concept of a gateway into a district or a village.
That's really nice.
Great
Mary
idea.
Jo?
I like the idea.
Yeah,
Bonnie?
I like the idea too. In fact, I think that the sign that we've had there on the corner of Hartford Avenue has blended in, so a lot of people really don't notice it unless they're actually looking for it. I think that if you go with something like that, it would be worthwhile to work together with other people who might be looking at the sign when you get off exit 70 and have consistency between signs. Come up with a design that everyone likes so that we can have consistency. I love the way that looks.
I do too. And that makes sense too, Bonnie. They have some, similarity between the signage. The place.
That would be a sign, Kurt, that would be on the bus area property, so to speak, for people traveling westerly.
Sure.
So I'm just thinking about where would be an appropriate location for people entering the Soundview area traveling easterly. I'm just kind of getting off the topic now, but
No, but valid question. Yeah, and we could
Okay.
certainly look at that. And the other thing to keep in mind is you can pick where you want that gateway to be. So as an example, you could decide, you know what, we want to actually extend it a little further east from the police station and stretch it. So you have total control over that. The good news is you've got a nice large right of way. So you could definitely get permission from DOT to place the sign. It would be on their property.
Okay.
You'd have to maintain it. Pretty straightforward. And I have found that in cases like this, they're very accommodating because it's a
So-
town kind of thing. And so it would
So
be
we-
on state property, and we could literally pick where we want to put it. And the town would have to maintain it. But pretty straightforward process, really.
okay. So we can easily put one on the eastbound side, somewhere around the Cross Lane vicinity, and the other one westbound side in the vicinity of Soundview Avenue, which kind of covers the whole district and kind of establishes that area, so to speak. Yeah. That
Probably.
little sign at the mini mart could. Right now, it's being managed by the Soundview Beach Association. I can make it a nicer sign anytime and just keep it there for the time being. That's not a big issue.
You'd probably have to be sensitive to neighbors whoever would be, the sign would be in front of their property. Would it be possible if you had that sign you displayed to have this thing be a permanent public sidewalk and sign easement if you want to put a sign at the top of Hartford Avenue where the Soundview sign is now to put that in the easement document?
Yeah, we definitely could. Right now, I read through Michael's easement document. I don't think it mentions a sign. He can
No.
easily add that in there. And then our work is essentially to prepare the legal description, meets and bounds description per A2, Connecticut A2 standards, prepare the drawing that goes on the land records. Really, from our perspective, we can adjust the physical size of the easement to make sure we're capturing where the sign goes, even to the point where, and we've done this in the past, it can even be an odd shape, meaning we have the easement for the sidewalk. We could literally have a little notch that just says this little notch is where the sign goes. And it literally means that not only is there an easement that exists for the sign to physically be there, the easement is continuous to the sidewalk. So somebody can walk from the sidewalk to the sign for maintenance or whatever. Very easy for us to do that.
Mhm.
So if we add that into the easement for the sidewalk, there's nothing says we have to put the sign there. So if we decide,
That's correct.
that it's more appropriate to put the signs on Shore Road and Soundview Avenue and Cross Lane area, then we don't have to put the sign at the mini mart and
That's right.
And we may want to put just one on the Welcome to Hartford Avenue or something like that, or who knows, we could play around with that in a number of different ways.
Yeah, you definitely have the flexibility. If the easement said you could put a sign in there, it doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
It just means you have the right to do that.
Well, it certainly gives us some flexibility, so.
Sure does, yeah.
Good. Any more on that? Okay. Going back to right-of-way concerns. This is an issue we've talked about at length and came up again. It's more obstructions of, in our right of way, in particular at the Port Lances. When we did our walkthrough on Hartford Avenue, we had an extensive discussion with the owners, and I think, Tim, you put out a memo that you felt that, or a note rather, that you feel that the committee should revisit this at that
Yeah.
particular address.
I think during our discussions, the Port Lances were very agreeable, but they were serious about the fact that the fence that they have is a vinyl fence and the materials are not easily replicated anymore. I think it's probably compliant on the north end and gradually gets to be maybe about 12 inches over on the south end. And they just asked whether they might be permitted to retain their fence. It would not seem that we would need that foot for any particular purpose. The sidewalk and the utility strip would be sufficiently away from that fence that it really wouldn't make a difference. Now, once you get to the hedge that's just to the south of their property and on down the way, those owner, I guess you'd call them improvements, start to become a problem. But it seemed that the Port Lances fence might be accepted from being moved because it would destroy the fence if it were moved. More than likely, it'd be an expense either to us or to them, but more likely to us. So I think if we can justify accommodating them, it might make some points and be really a fair way to handle it if the committee agreed.
Well, I think that, Tim, I think that, you know, cost of the fence is really, it's their responsibility. They put the fence on town property. So we shouldn't have any cost of that fence whatsoever at all. That's my personal opinion. But be that as it may, I understand that, and I think it's important that we be sensitive to the homeowners. And if it really doesn't make a big difference to us one way or the other, maybe we try to accommodate them as you're suggesting. But we can't just have it open-ended. So we need to have some sort of limit to that and some sort of establishment that if we allow this to be there, then should damage occur to it through the construction, it's not our fault. And should that fence ever have to be repaired or fixed, then it has to be moved onto their own property at their own expense.
We had a situation another time where someone asked to have a fence on town property, and there was a problem with getting insurance, which was something that we required. I would suggest if we're going to look the other way with this fence, then we make it clear that we look the other way until the fence needs to be replaced, and then it needs to be put on their own property. Rather than, saying, yeah, it's okay, and letting that move forward over time. And then they have the option of just keeping it there infinitum, I
That's
think
a good
it's
point, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Yeah, just from a surveyor's perspective, in the state of Connecticut, there is something called an easement by prescription. So if they have what's called open and notorious use, in this case, it clearly is, for a period of 20 years, they then establish or have the benefit of an easement, and then you can no longer force them to remove it. So if you were going to allow them to have the fence there, my suggestion would be that some document be established to what Bonnie just said, that says we recognize that it's here on the property, and what you see on your screen is the flag is where the pin is for the right of way, and you can see the fence. That's Jesse Harris in the background from my office. A document that says, okay, we understand that the fence is on our property. You are responsible for the fence. At such time this fence ever gets replaced, it cannot go back in that location. It must be moved back to your property.
Yeah, I think that we also should, yeah, I agree. That's what I was saying earlier too. I mean, there can't be an open-ended. And then if it gets damaged during construction, it's not our fault.
Yeah, this is Eric. As we discussed that morning out there with them, if the contractor that we hire feels that they want to take that fence down during construction because of worrying about, damaging it, are we going to put it back in its proper place, or at that point, does it get put back, to the town right-of-way line?
What's left of it.
Right. We had talked about a contractor may want to take it down temporarily so they don't have to worry about damaging it, especially since it's a fence that can't be replaced. So if they hit it with one, they break one spindle, now they're going to replace the whole entire fence. And how far does that have to go? So that's something we have to consider that they may want to do. And then at that point, then do we just put it back in the same spot, or we move it to the town, the town property line?
I would
Well,
say
no, I
under
think-
no circumstance should it go back to the same spot. It sounds like it's not going to be able to be moved. So taking it out means it's done. But, and that should be an option that the town has if it needs to be moved.
Well, that fence is all screwed. Each section is screwed up with, 3-4 screws. So it could be easily taken down and put back up in the same spot. The only issue would be the posts that are cemented in the ground, but those posts are easily, those are not something, those are things that can be found right now. It's the actual fence panels that we have to be concerned about. So when we do the walkthrough with there you go. Perfect. So
Oh, thanks.
something that obviously can come down with relative ease, but a contractor may just say, hey, I'm fine with it. It can stay. And then if we had that document that we've been talking about, I think that's a good idea.
Kurt, how far is the fence away from the road bed? I mean, if the sidewalk's 7.5 feet, how far back is the fence?
Yeah, at its closest point, and I'll have to use approximate dimensions here, but there's still several feet between the proposed back of sidewalk and the fence, even at its location where you saw that blue flag. There's still a couple of feet that will get filled in. Remember, we will be, because the sidewalk is level, whereas now that ground slopes down. But there's a couple of feet that will still remain. So it's not like the back of the sidewalk will be right up against the fence.
No.
And to Eric's point, if the contractor is careful, because he's not, all he's doing is going to be filling in some soil and then really sod between the back of the sidewalk and the fence. If he's careful, he really has no reason to touch the fence. If you recall, their driveway is also getting lifted slightly, but again, he's not necessarily that close to the fence. If he's careful, he should be able to stay away.
I think at the driveway, it's almost compliant.
It is compliant. Yeah, I'm just talking about the actual distance where the contractor is going to be excavating, paving. You've got that last post right there that he'll be within a couple of feet of that post. So he'll have to work carefully. Like Eric said, with these machines, that vinyl is probably 10, 15 years old. It's probably very brittle at this point. It won't take much to break it. So they'll have to be very careful.
Well, and then we go back to the same conversation. If the contractor does not feel comfortable with that fence in the location it is, then we move it. And, simple as that. If he says okay, and one of the things I want to make sure about that we do allow it to play and stay, remain in place with whatever documentation that Bonnie and Kurt were talking about earlier, which is appropriate. we establish the criteria that allows it to stay in place, because we have a number of other encroachments in the Soundview area. And as we do our surveying throughout the course of the next several years, I'm sure we're going to find more encroachments. And we have to be sensitive to precedent here. If we say we're going to leave this fence here, we need to have a reason we're leaving a fence there. And if we have somebody else with encroachment, a reason why we're going to ask them to remove that encroachment. So I think it's a matter of really establishing a criteria of some sort.
So this would not be, this would have to be a separate document than the temporary right to work on their property agreement, correct?
That is correct. This document would be more similar to the permanent easement. And I use that word permanent lightly because in this case, it's I guess a semi-permanent easement if there is such a thing, but it would be more like what you see up at the Easy Mart.
So can I have maybe one or two members of the committee, like, put together a proposed document for Tim? Tim too, if you want to work on it.
Try it.
Well, I'll work with you, Tim, on this. You know, we can put something together for the next meeting.
And my suggestion would be take what Michael prepared, use it as a template.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll take that up at our next meeting, specifically the verbiage. But I think I think we should have a motion that I think the effect we're going to document the allowance of this obstacle on town property, subject to our contractor's
It's
final decision.
needs. I'm happy to make that motion. And that it should be that once the fence comes down, it cannot be replaced in the same location. It has to be off of town property.
Second,
I'll second, Eric.
Eric. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Jim?
I'm ex officio.
Jim, are you
Can you
still
guys-
there?
Oh, Jim.
I got you, Eric. Jim, are you still there?
Can you hear me, Mary Jo?
Yes, thank you. Did you said,
Okay,
did you
you
vote?
can,
I can hear you.
yes, aye.
Okay. No nays, no abstentions. Motion carried. Thank you. We're making progress, guys. This is good.
And
Yep.
just a clarification that would help me. So just so I'm clear, our plans will call to protect fence. The hedges that we looked at, I think we had talked about those not being trimmed by the town's contractor, that the town would ask the homeowner to trim those hedges. And I just wanted to confirm.
I
to
believe
make
that was
sure-
our conversation, yes.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm putting the right directive to your contractor on the plans.
Yeah, if our contractor trims and then something happens with the bushes, then I don't want us to be responsible for them. Let the homeowner trim them.
All right, I'll put a call out then, protect hedges.
Everything else then that we discussed goes forward, that fence that's clearly on the sidewalk will have to be taken out and removed.
Do we send a letter or even a certified letter to the property owners saying our improvements are in the work area and must be removed by a certain date so that, you know, they don't drag their feet and go home for the winter and then they're going to be in the way next spring?
Yeah, I would say so.
And And I don't know, there's probably a legal precedent. If they don't respond, we might have to have, we must have your action by such and such a date, or this kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, or it will be removed by town crews.
Yeah, maybe Mike can draft something so we don't get into a legal tizzy with somebody.
So which ones are we talking about for that?
Well, the properties south of Portlands, the hedges, the other vinyl fences that are clearly in the way, and
Oh, I thought we were just gonna take them out, the vinyl fences.
say again.
I thought we were just going to, our contractor was just going to remove them.
Well, if we tell a homeowner, it's their property, so we ought to probably give them notice that we respectfully request they remove their improvements from town property. And should this not occur by such a date, the town will be required to remove them and lean them up against their building or something.
Okay.
Yeah, all that stuff.
And typically what we'll say, and just to confirm for the committee's information, we'll be doing the same thing on Route 156 with the number of the signs that are in the right of way.
Okay.
Typically, we will say on the plans, remove sign, turn over to owner. So in this case, if you wanted to, we could say remove fence, turn over to owner.
What about, do we have to do a sidewalk cut? I mean, how do we talk about sidewalks?
Yep, so in the image that you see here, this is the one area where we will be saw cutting the sidewalk. To get an approximate location of the right of way, the post that you see on the right, that's about right at the right of way. So what we would do is just saw the existing concrete walk very cleanly at the right of way line. So that walkway would essentially end right there.
But shouldn't our letter indicate that to the owner so that it's the fence and the sidewalk, so they aren't surprised that the sidewalk gets cut and removed?
Yes, I would definitely recommend that.
I agree. I think you can make it clear that they don't have to remove the sidewalk, but let them know that a portion of that sidewalk is going to go because it is on town property.
Because none of those people were at the Saturday meeting.
Right. And what's a little bit unique about this property, unlike some of the other properties, there's really not much that we have to do on their property. However, we will be preparing the temporary access agreements for all the properties. I believe this property does have a small segment of driveway to adjust. In fact, yes, this property does have a very, very small section of driveway. So they'll be getting this is actually theirs. They'll be getting this with the temporary rights agreement. So not only, I agree with the letter, the plan that we've prepared shows that work. So you've sort of got two ways that you'll be advising them. You might even include the plan with the letter that you send and say the attached shows the work that's going to be done at your property, and it will show cutting the sidewalk. If you wanted to show removing the fence, or if you could say you have to remove the fence, but that'll be a nice visual. And actually I have when we get to that point, I have a couple examples that I'd like to show the committee of what we've developed for those to get your feedback. But so they'll have a visual for exactly what's being done. It won't have to be all described in words.
I would agree with sending a copy of that plan to the homeowner who I believe lives in town. I believe he has another property on Lime Street, so he should, possibly be available. But he should definitely get a copy of the plan so that there's a heads up. And if the fence doesn't get removed, then we take it out because we do have the right without any kind of, without any problem of taking anything that's in the right of way out. As far as the bushes go, I think, further up north on Hartford, those bushes the roots are on the homeowner's property. So it's just a matter of trimming them back. And the Portland's fence is, it's a foot over. I wouldn't worry so much about those. But this one, the homeowner will get a full heads up as to what we're going to do. And if it's not done in a timely manner, we're going to go in and take it out.
Okay. And I believe that's the Dr. Awa's property.
Right.
And as Tim said, he didn't make the meeting nor responded to our letter. So we should send him that. If it's okay, I'll work on a draft. I'll take a draft letter and suggestions from Kurt, and I'll send it to Tim also, so we can discuss that at our next meeting. Okay?
Good.
Okay. All right. That's right-of-way concerns. Municipal grant requirements. Today I sent the committee the estimate of work that BSC has given us, the extras, which are needed. Under the grant, we're required to have municipal oversight. And he also provided us an estimate for doing the easement work that he talked about before that our lawyer needs to finish that piece. Did everyone get a chance to look at that? Because I really do think, okay, because I really do think we need to talk about next steps for this. I can't find mine, but hopefully you can find yours. There it is. Okay. The proposal for easement services, this went to Tim. Basically, Kurt, BSC is identifying the services that will be needed to do easement work. And it's a lump sum. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, because I'm looking at this really for the first time.
Yes, it is. It is a absolutely fixed fee. Assuming that, that's easier. Most towns, that's easier to deal with. So essentially, if we need to make 1 visit, 2 visits, 3 visits, that the fee is the fee. That's fixed.
Okay. And that's, and then number 5 is an additional lump sum. If you
Yep, and I broke that out in case that you felt that was not needed or desired. Most of the time, we will put physical markers, in this case in the form of iron pins, to physically mark the boundaries of the easement in the field. So somebody can literally go out there and locate it, very similar to the iron pins that we find along Hartford Avenue. Every once in a while, people say, I don't need that. If we ever needed to recreate it, I'll just hire a surveyor to go out and recreate it. The advantage of having the iron pins is they're pretty much permanent. Then you don't need a surveyor to go out and locate the easement. If you don't have the iron pins in there, the surveyor will have to essentially recreate the survey. He may charge you $1,500 to go out and mark out your easement. So it saves you money in the long term, but it's not something that's a legal requirement. It is a recommendation. If there was ever a dispute, it's nice to have those pins in the ground. That, the pins are placed by the surveyors, they're certified, they're shown on the plan that gets filed at town hall. And then there's absolutely no question as to where the line or the easement line is.
Because we know from our town clerk that we really don't have an easement, do you have to do number one?
Yeah, number one is kind of a legal requirement for the land surveyor to meet the A2 standard, that he needs to look at the property deed. It's also important because when they physically locate the easement on the property, they want to make sure that relative to the existing property lines, everything mathematically is correct. And that all relates back to the Class A2 standard. Extremely high level of precision, which means they need to avail themselves of the legal description for the existing property, because that also has to get shown on the easement plan. So the licensed surveyor wants to see it on the land records to make sure that he is using the correct, I'll call it, baseline of the property. And you'd be surprised when we do things like this, and it varies in the level of detail and things, we do find errors, what we call discrepancies. What happens sometimes, so as an example, we know that the property corner between Hartford Avenue and Soundview is kind of in the pavement, but there is a theoretical Connecticut DOT point right there that defines the edge of the right-of-way. As you're facing the business on Shore Road, there's also a Connecticut DOT marker off to your right-hand side. Our surveyors locate those physical points in the field and compare them to the legal description that's in the town records. Ideally, they should match. Every once in a while, there is a discrepancy, and we call that a discrepancy between found, meaning found in the field, and record data. And that's a problem, because you don't want to prepare an easement document that, because it's based on the existing property lines and is using some of those physical reference markers in the field, you wouldn't want to write an easement when you don't even have a clear depiction, or when there exists a discrepancy with what's on the land records versus what's physically in the field. So that number one is to make sure that everything starts off, that we're working with a solid foundation.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have a question on that?
So Kurt, if there is a discrepancy between record and physical, what do? Just keep working your way back until you find a location where there's no discrepancy, and then recalculate from that point on?
In a sense, yes. And where it gets a little bit tricky, and this is why our survey manager has gray hair, because sometimes, and we've dealt with this recently on a few projects, what happens is you'll start tracing things back, and you're exactly right. You start looking at adjacent properties, and it all goes back to trying to make things reconcile mathematically. So you'll go to adjacent properties, because every property line touches another property line, right? So we use that almost like a checkerboard. We use that to try to recreate that puzzle. What sometimes happens is we'll go back and we will actually find somewhere along the line a surveyor actually made an error. And so then we'll say, aha, okay, they were off by 1 degree. That's why the highway monument doesn't match the legal description. So again, in order to satisfy that Class A2 standard, we have to run it all the way back till things match and try to find out, where did that error occur? We've also seen situations where a legal description may call out, let's say, a monument, but in the field, it's in a different spot. Well, it very could be that at some point, somebody made a mistake and actually incorrectly installed the monument. Well, before we move that monument, because now that's a legal definition of the boundary, we have to state the case as to why it's justified. And you might imagine a property owner that has seen a certain monument or something for their entire life. Suddenly you say, oh, by the way, that's not really your property line, right? We have to make sure that we have a very, very defensible case to that effect. So you really hope that the record data and the physical data in the field match. That's really the ideal scenario. I am confident that because it's a state highway line, that I'm really hoping, because the state highway lines are so well established, right? They have their own mapping, they have the monuments. I'm really hoping that there's no issues there.
Okay, any other questions? Tim, we have two proposals from BSC, and I'm not sure what you would recommend we do as far as these are town responsibilities. Would you like the committee to vote on agreeing to this, or do you feel we have to do additional steps as far as our Board of Finance would be involved?
Well, I think if we could describe what the tasks are, it's like a clerk of the works or something of that sort, then it could be a definition and a price, and it could be in as much as the $40,000 engineering fee will not include these items, then we'll have to ask for additional funding to do that. And there is a Board of Finance tonight, so it might be a bit premature since we're not going to go out to bid till November. So we can perhaps at the next Board of Finance meeting have a few sentences as to the tasks at hand for each one, and then the prices and why these are necessary. And if at this point, I guess the original $40,000 contract's okay, and with the grant money's fine. The grant, depending on the answer to our prevailing wage, we may have more paving or less paving, but that's a future deal. So I think these are the only two extra expenses that you can think of that might be needed. If there's others, then fine, we need to know that.
I didn't see the document, so could you tell me what the costs are, because I don't have that.
Sure. The one we've been talking about is the A2 easement guide requirements, and BSC has proposed a lump sum of $1,800 for basically providing a Schedule A description of the easement area, and then an additional $750 if we would request that they put in the iron pins that he was describing, that most towns do.
Is this for Hartford Avenue only?
Yes, this is for the permanent easement at the, I call it Extra Mart. Is it Easy Mart? I always get that wrong. At
Easy.
Easy Mart.
It's only for around the corner there?
That's correct.
It's for where the sidewalk goes over private property at the Easy Mart.
Now, I guess the survey for Hartford Avenue exists, right, Frank?
Well, we don't have a survey per se for Hartford Avenue. We have what Kurt's group has already done for Hartford Avenue.
Right.
So that we do have a survey for that, from that standpoint. It's just that corner up there where the mini mart.
Okay.
That
All
we're
right.
dealing
So this is a survey in the pins. What I thought there was some conversation about once this job gets rolling, we would need contract supervision, job supervision, and so forth.
Yes.
When do we want to talk about that? Because I suppose is when we go out to bid, that'll be covered by the 400,000, but probably the clerk of the works, or whatever you want to call it, though any other positions are not budgeted. So would they would be extra outside the 400 or less sidewalk? Bonnie, I don't know now.
I was just going to suggest that maybe we want to talk to the Board of Finance about just giving us a percentage above the 40,000, since here you've got one example. It's not saying we're going to spend it, but usually, 10% to 20% contingency to cover these kinds of things, and just fund it. Because if we go for the exact amount, I fear that there are going to be other little things like this and some of the things you're mentioning, Tim. So
Yeah.
Maybe between now and the time you go to the Board of Finance, we should give that some really good thought and add a little bit extra just so we have the leeway. Because we can't go back to them a second time.
No. But we probably, Kurt, do you think we need a clerk of the works there, or you guys to supervise, to do the typical AIA work and all that? It may be more than just small money. It might be, I don't know, a couple $1,000. I don't know.
Yeah, very valid question. So I do not think you need a clerk of the works. And typically when I consider clerk of the works, it usually means full-time person. Very similar to what we had on the previous Soundview project, which was quite expensive and a bit unfortunate, if you will, but it was a requirement of the federal funding.
Yeah.
That was where the money originated. In this case, the good news is you don't need that full-time inspection. So the proposal that I put together, and it's stamped as a draft for discussion, is for really 3 elements. It's for, and I lump these under the umbrella of what I call construction phase services, right? So these things begin right after the final design documents are put out to bid. So it includes 3 items in very brief summary. Bidding services, where we are running a pre-bid meeting. We're answering questions posed by bidders. We're assisting you with a review of the bids. We're preparing a very detailed bid analysis package for you that is required by DOT. That package has to go up to DOT with justification for the recommendation of award to the lowest qualified bidder, and then a scope review with the apparent low bidder to make sure that they picked up everything. The second piece is what we call design services during construction. I think the connectivity grant calls it something slightly different. I think I used both. Bear with me. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'll just open up the proposal. Oh, yeah. Okay. They call it consultation during construction. It's sometimes called design services during construction. So I used both. And essentially what that is, that's really what I consider the administrative part of the project. So that is to review all of the periodic progress meetings that the contractor may have. That's doing all the shop drawing review, catalog cuts, and those kinds of things, maintaining a log of those submittals. That's reviewing all of the contractors' material sampling and all their testing. For example, they have to submit samples, sample results for all the earth materials and those kinds of things. During construction, the contractor is responsible for things such as testing the density of the materials that he's compacting under the sidewalk, taking samples of the concrete that's poured at the project to make sure that it meets the specs. So we will make sure that that's all done properly. We'll review those testing results. And if there's a result that came up not to our specs, we flag it, we notify the town. There's requests for information during the project where the contractor may say, I don't understand what you want here. So that's us preparing responses to those, maybe supplemental sketches. Sometimes it's as simple as some phone calls with the project superintendent. And that's a great tool, that we can use. Now we're even getting to the point where we have Zoom. These project superintendents have Zoom on their mobile phone. We're able to literally just from our desk speak with them like we're speaking here. It's really nice. We don't have to even physically be at the site. If they have a change order, if something came up, either that there was an unknown condition, let's say we ran into some buried garbage or something, and they said, hey, we need to take all this out and put good material back. We would review on your behalf. Okay, what are you charging us that for, et cetera, and advise you. We would prepare documentation, what's called construction change directives. If there was a change needed for the project, clearly we want to document that as opposed to just verbally telling the contractor to make a change. So we would prepare that paperwork for you. If it needed to be accompanied by a supplemental sketch or something so it's well documented, we would prepare that. And then lastly, there's construction progress reports that are required by DOT. We could absolutely help you prepare those reports and even submit them to DOT on your behalf. And so
applications for payment, is that in there?
Yes, every month we review what we call a pencil requisition, where the contractor submits that to us and we review it. And if we don't like what we see, we tell them, nope, change this. So then when he submits the final one, we review it. We maintain a log of those. We check all the math. And then if we agree with it, I should also mention, because we're going with a lump sum on this project, we compare those payment applications to the contractor's schedule of values. And that's in the contract documents of what the schedule of values is. It's essentially it's a schedule, not from a calendar perspective, but a schedule from a financial perspective. How does he anticipate, let's say his bid is $400,000. Over the course of the project, how does he envision that he's going to spend that $400,000? And we use the schedule of values to predict what those payment applications will be. A primary value of it is to prevent contractors from front-loading the job, meaning he puts out some silt fence and he does a few other things. We get the first application for payment and it's 50% of the value of the job. We can go back to the schedule of values and say, no. Wait a second. Your schedule of values has you for a first application at 8%. Redo it. So we are sort of your fiduciary in that regard. Once we find all is in order, we execute it as the engineer. We have a kind of a standard letter that we send to you and we say, we reviewed it. We think it's okay. We recommend that you proceed and make the payment. And then the third piece of, again, under that larger umbrella of construction phase services is what's called construction and observation. And that's where we are physically going to the site periodically. That's the nice thing about this. We're not there every day. We know what the contractor's schedule is going to be, both calendar schedule of values, and literally just from discussions. We know when we want to go down there, periodic, to make sure that the work's proceeding in accordance with the plans and specs. We're photo documenting. We're looking at materials and products that may be staged at the site to make sure that it's what was in the documents. Tracking any discrepancies, right? If we go down there and we see a section of sidewalk doesn't meet our satisfaction, we immediately flag it and call out and say that's not acceptable. It's got to be redone. we bring that to your attention. It's also being available really on an as-needed basis for the contractor for technical clarifications, questions. Every once in a while, we run into situations where a contractor says, hey, I ran into a situation, I'm not sure how to deal with it. Can somebody come down here? I need some in the field direction. So we would mobilize Carly Corbo, who's I have teed up to be the field engineer for this project, would take a ride down, physically look at it in the field. You know, she needed to report back to me as the professional engineer that's going to be signing off on things. We would have a conversation. Then last but not least, it's really when the work is at what we call substantial completion, it's doing that inspection, going down there, walking the project soup to nuts, looking at every project element to see if it conforms to the documents. For those items that we don't feel pass muster, we prepare a punch list, send that to the contractor and say, okay, these are the items you have to fix. Work with him to understand when are these going to get fixed. And then we do a final inspection. And ideally, we do that with you, the committee or the municipal representative, so you can see it out there too and make sure that you're comfortable with everything. It's one thing for us to say, okay, yeah, we're good with it, but we want to make sure that you as the owner are comfortable with it too. So that's the construction monitoring and observation piece. So that's kind of the three pieces of construction phase services. Sorry, that was a long one.
What price range would you establish for that whole package?
Yeah, right now I ran some numbers. I basically did a spreadsheet and looked at the time frame and whatnot. I'm recommending a budget of $35,000. In this case, we would not do it as a lump sum, because if we can do it for $25,000, great, right? So we would only, and I have rates in there, so it's all very open book. There's nothing that's hidden or whatnot. Every hour we spend, you'll see it. There'll be descriptions of what we did. We could even give you, and we've done this on projects, bi-weekly financial updates throughout the process. So in a sense, you're getting a summary spreadsheet every 2 weeks that says, okay, over the past 2 weeks, this is what was spent, who spent it, and it equates to these dollars. So you can track that. So that's a budget that's been established. We always try to keep the ultimate cost as low as we can.
So Tim, if you'll get a chance to read what was sent to you today from Kurt, and I've just been kind of looking at this also for the first time, but the services that Kurt described were the estimate of $35,000, and then if there was anything additional, like materials, that the town would request, that would be outside the scope. As far as your question on, does this come out of the construction grant? The answer is no. This is a municipal requirement. The grant does not pay for anything but construction. So $400,000 is just for sidewalk, curbing, work on the properties that we put in the preliminary design. The requirements of the grant, the community connectivity grant, had specific requests for the municipality, and that's what is requested, that we requested Kurt to provide an estimate on. The document does seem like it's really well laid out for the discussions with the Board of Finance. He clearly has indicated the services and then provided the fee for the services at the end. So the scope and the specifics of the services. So I think you did a really good job.
And this needs to be outside the 400,000 for the construction, right?
That's correct.
So it could be rounding up to $40,000 in addition to the 400, I guess, for these soft costs and a survey and so forth, just to provide a little margin.
Yes,
And if I could, I just wanted to point something out that as I was putting together that proposal, I noticed it in the community connectivity grant guidelines. And I'll be completely honest, it confused me a little bit. So it's on page 11 of the guidelines, and it's under a heading called cost participation. And it says construction will be funded up to the approved grant award amount and may include, so that's right away, I started, or may include up to 10% for contingencies to provide an allowance for normal quantity adjustments, minor unforeseen field conditions, and minor field changes that do not increase the project scope, extend project limits, etc. So as I mentioned, if they find a little bit of buried garbage, it sounds like DOT is saying, we understand that that happens. And then it says plus, and there's a second bullet, up to 10% for incidentals to provide an allowance for inspection and materials testing services. Now, in our case here, in discussions with the Connecticut DOT, we're having the contractor cover the testing under his umbrella, and he'll use like a certified third party. But they say incidental. So the reason I say I was a little confused is a lot of times incidentals may or may not mean labor. So I saw that and I kind of scratched my head, and I wasn't sure what DOT was trying to tell us there.
It seems to me that you should reach out to the DOT and ask if any of those costs can be covered with the 400,000, because it was my understanding that the design is not covered, engineering design, but some of this oversight, just it has to be part of the construction. So I would just clarify it with them, because anything that we can get covered out of the grant, I think we should. The fact is, at that cost, you have to go to a town meeting
Right.
to have that approved.
I agree with
Yeah.
Bonnie. My impression was that the inspection portion would be covered under the construction. I could be wrong, but I think we definitely, before we proceed, need to get determination on that. And I guess the side question would be, is that something that we could possibly handle ourselves? An FDA type thing, or is that something that we definitely need professional service in this case to review the actual construction? And that's one aspect. The other question I have is, I'm going to need an HU survey for the easement at the Easy Mark corner, especially if we're going to have an additional easement for a sign. It would be great to have the pins set so we know exactly where that easement is. How far have our discussions gone with the Easy Mart? I mean, I know they're amenable to a sidewalk. Have they seen the plan? Or when we talked to them last, where they're like, well, yeah, all right, send me some paperwork, we'll see what happens. In other words, is there a possibility that we're going to contract for an HU survey and setting pins, and then Easy Mart's going to go, oh, hell no, we're not going to go for this?
right.
We delayed that meeting with Easy Mart until we had approval from DOT. So I don't believe we rescheduled that Easy Mart meeting. Am I correct on that, Mary Jo?
Yes.
So maybe we ought to have that meeting, that discussion with them, just to make sure we're going on the right track, like Jim suggested.
Right.
I think that's appropriate at this time.
Before we move forward with Kurt, just show them Kurt's plan as it stands right now. And because it's fairly, it's just a little corner of their property. And if they say, oh yeah, that's going to be fine, then we'll go ahead and come up with a legal document that'll set that in motion.
Yeah, I have some questions, Kurt, on some of the tasks that you described. And I have to go back and look at the original, our original contract that we're working under right now, but it sounds like some of those tasks that you described in terms of the new arrangement would overlap with some of the tasks that exist with your present contractual obligations. For instance, RFIs and construction document clarifications during construction. I mean, you're designing the project, so if there's a clarification that's required during the construction, isn't that part of your present task?
No, it's not. Our task ends after. Oh, actually, I'm looking at it now. Our task ends after bidding. So in fact,
Any RFIs prior to bidding
we-
would be part of that.
we already have, so I'm glad I put a draft stamp on there. I had forgot that we already have the bidding piece covered under the base agreement. Once you sign the contract with the contractor, then our scope ends.
Okay.
So
there is
that would
some overlap.
include, even if there was, theoretically, even if there was questions during construction, we would not be there to answer any of those questions.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm glad I put a draft stamp on there. So the bidding piece can just be deleted in its entirety. That's actually task 4 of our existing scope of services. Sorry about that.
Now, that's what I thought too, but I was
Yeah,
agreement, but thank you, Frank. But,
I-
but the real,
It happens to me all the time. I forget.
yeah.
the real issue, of course, is, you know, I did have a discussion with DOT early on about the municipal costs, which are the oversight piece. So I will call them again. I'll be happy to lay out the specifics that have been suggested to us to see if we have a contingency allowance for that. But I was pulling out the agreement letter that was signed in 2015, and there is nothing, no contingency listed. So I will go back and be happy to try and get some feedback before we go to the Board of Finance on that.
So Kurt, how many thousand do we cut to 35,000?
I think I can knock off about $500. No, I'm kidding. I could easily look at it. Yeah, it'll be a few $1,000s for sure. And
Okay,
again, that's the beauty of having it on a time and materials basis. If
Yeah.
we don't do it, we don't spend it. So it protects the town.
Well,
Well,
and here's the thing, if it's under 20,000, we don't have to go to a town meeting. So that's closer to the number we're looking at, I would think.
Yeah.
it's not gonna be that, yeah. We got a lot to go because the survey's in there too. So once we get your revised number, likely we're gonna be looking at a town meeting regardless, I expect, because I can't imagine the bidding would be such a severe part of that 35.
Yeah, and I can have that revised to you tomorrow, and I'll leave the draft stamp on it. That way it's still open for discussion. I'll pull that whole bidding piece off and go back to my spreadsheet and readjust the budget down, of course.
And this would technically, the construction would likely begin in March or April, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, right now we have it going from March 1st to May 28th. You know, they'll be done before May 28th because we'll be pushing up against Memorial Day. So that's the period that we have it carried. We have the month of June on the schedule, if you recall, is just closeout. And that's
Yeah.
really more administrative type
Okay.
things, right? Paperwork, final certifications to DOT. You know, if there was a mailbox that was loose and the contractor had to go down there and, you know,
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
Well, it's clearly going to be within the fiscal year. So we likely could not budget any of this work to the next fiscal year. So we'll have to come up with a number not to exceed kind of thing for the Board of Finance and then with that. But I think it's definitely going to be a town meeting deal, even with your slim down on the bidding thing.
I'm very nervous about going to a town meeting to ask for any more money for anything in Soundview. I think we've already seen some blowback that I've kind of been warning about, where we've been misinterpreted. You know, again, people think we've overpromised and underdelivered. I would much rather pause right here, get a determination from DOT as to what is covered before we even go to the Board of Finance for an informal discussion. Everyone's going to be acting in good faith, I'm sure, but it's very easy for all this to get politicized in this environment. So I'd like to see what would get covered and then get a sense of what we need to ask for. And if possible, I would rather scale back the project and tuck that construction service money into the existing grant than go to the Board of Finance or go to the town, especially a town meeting, and ask for more money. I just think that's the third rail in the project.
Well, maybe one of you could volunteer to be on the conversation. I'll set up a call with our contacted DOT to go over this, but I think it'd be good to have more than myself on the call, given the amount of money we're talking.
Yeah, I can do that with you, Mary Jo. Just, let me know when we could do it. I assume it'll be a Zoom call or WebEx.
Yes. Yeah, or just a conference call.
Yeah, whichever. Okay.
Conference call, because obviously, it's the stuff we need to discuss based on what's allowed under the grant.
Okay, let me know when we can do that.
All right, thank you, Eric.
Let me ask you a question. If there's funding left over, if there's budgetary funding left over in accounts, we've used that in the past to supplement. I don't know what's available and where it might be available, but is that an option of looking around and see what accounts have funding available to them?
Such as?
Well, I know that the Soundview Commission has got almost our entire budget that hasn't been used because we haven't done anything this year because of COVID.
The trouble with municipal accounting, the spending's on one side of the China wall and the revenue's on the other side. So you can have wonderful sources of revenue, but you still have to have the approval to spend the money. So that's a conundrum. And 20,000 is the limit for the finance board. And beyond that, that's a town meeting. If COVID is still going, the Board of Selectmen can do certain things, but you still have to it still has to be publicized and so forth.
Right.
So,
It's still considered a town meeting. But, some towns have staff. Some towns have town engineers. We do not. Not unusual, but that's why we do have to go out and request additional services. So it just is because we try and keep our staff low and use people, the experts when we need them. So that's not a bad thing. We're getting experts where we need it.
yeah.
Okay, so Kurt, thank you for sending that to us. Appreciate it because we did really need to have this discussion. Everyone can look at it.
Pleasure.
Provide some feedback by email would be great to the so that when we go to the discussion with Newington, I'll have that. So Eric, I will call the contact tomorrow and see when I can set this up. And then maybe give them some days and times. If you have some days and times that work for you, just send me an email.
Okay, I'll look at my calendar. Can you resend what Kurt sent? Because I didn't get that either
Sure.
like Bonnie said, his proposal there. I didn't see an email from about that.
Okay.
And I will have that revised tomorrow. I'll get that out on the early side.
But the tasks are fine, and even if he could talk to us tomorrow, I can take off one. That's not a problem. All right, thank you, everybody. We are moving along. We're down to budget. How appropriate. Kurt, I was going to ask you if you had any project cost updates other than what you provided us some time ago, an overall estimate, which was like 535.
Yep, we're actually in it's a work in progress. We should be able to have something in pretty short order here.
Okay.
Potentially by the end of the week. The next update, as we're now kind of going through, one of the biggest things that'll get adjusted or that will cause the budget to be adjusted is the work on private property. Now that we've gotten to the point where that work has been detailed out, and I have a couple of examples that I'd like to show the committee of what we're doing and what will be the exhibits, but that's going to allow us to pretty much get to what for the most part will be a final number. Then that will set the stage for the Shore Road piece to talk about what the committee would like to do as far as the alternates, base bid, the alternates, et cetera.
Okay. And that's a perfect entree into what I'd like to have discussed is at least some feedback for the deducts, whatever we're calling those, in the bid process for what we're going to prioritize on Shore Road. Now that we know that the preliminary design was accepted, Justin, you presented it. Congratulations to them. We had a kind of a sidebar discussion, I guess, when we were doing our walkthrough on the Saturday walkthrough. Tim and Frank and I spoke with Eric also about, and Jim also chimed in about what part of Shore Road would be the priority, what would seem to fit with the purpose of the connectivity grant most, and what we might want to expect to have to maybe request another bid, the connectivity grant cycle. So I was hoping we talked about it before. I was hoping we could kind of come up with some guidelines for Kurt. I'll start if you want. I would really like to see the part of Shore Road that's west of Hartford Avenue to be our priority between Hartford Avenue and Cross Lane, because there's connectivity in that regard for people walking from say school kids walking from Mile Creek School down for a field trip down to the beach area. That's always been important. We discussed it a lot to include, community members north of 156. So to me, that also picks up a lot of the businesses in that area too. Okay, Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
Oh, I was waving at somebody at the door.
Oh, I thought you were.
That's okay.
Next.
I would agree with you, Mary Jo. I would say that should be the priority. I guess, depending on the length that you can fit in this budget, I suppose you would start from Hartford Avenue and go towards the west first, as far as you can, and then continue from that point to the east, depending on the budget.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that the westerly of Hartford Avenue is probably a good area from Hartford Avenue to Cross Lane. I think that the package is from Cross Lane to Soundview Avenue. That's the package at Hartford Avenue. And deduct 1 would be from Soundview Avenue to Swan Avenue Extension. And deduct 2 would be Swan Avenue Extension to Hartford Avenue Extension. So, basically it's Hartford Avenue and Hartford Avenue West, and then Hartford Avenue East with 2 deducts just in case we need to put them in place. That makes sense, Kurt?
And
Yeah, we can have more than one, for sure.
and can I suggest even a third one? I mean, I'm concerned that Hartford plus Shore from Hartford to Cross Lane may blow the budget as well. So to have that broken out as a third piece, and if that does get broken out, that the entire portion get removed, because I'm very concerned about a sidewalk to nowhere on Shore Road. I'd much rather have things buttoned up on Hartford the best we can, rather than having, you know, Hartford and then up to Shore, and then maybe, you know, we go to, we go to nowhere. I mean, we go a couple blocks to Shore. I'd much rather have Hartford, maybe add a few entities in there if we're under budget, than have a portion of that west of Hartford to Cross Lane built.
I suggest that with our bid documents, we clearly state, and it's certainly no secret, that our funding is for $400,000. And I think that if we give the contractor too many opportunities for deducts, we're just going to be deducting ourselves down to nothing. So, here's Mr. Contractor, here's our project. It's $400,000. Can you do it for $400,000? Oh, no, you can't? Okay, well, deduct this little portion from here to there. And make it, pretty clear that at the very baseline, it's Hartford Avenue and Hartford Avenue extension west to Cross Lane. And it's got to be in the $400,000 range. I understanding how contractors bid, I would tend to believe that we will have a much better chance of getting everything we want if we just work on that approach.
Kurt, it seems like we're pretty squared away on Hartford Avenue.
Yes.
We need to get the private property work number, and of course, the Hartford Avenue sidewalk curbing, utility strip, all that, and that'll be that package.
Right.
I really don't, I may have missed things, but I don't think we have near the specificity on Route 156 that we do on Hartford Avenue. So how much private property work might there be required on Route 156? And then what would be the cost of the actual sidewalk? You probably wouldn't have the utility strip and the curbing and all that stuff, but it seems like we need the four elements there. And likely it won't be, the 400 won't be enough for both of those projects. But do you think the private property work on Route 156 very well to have an educated guess as to what we have to spend to cut off people's access or restore it or whatever else there?
Yep. So on Shore Road, there is zero impacts to private property. Everything is being done within the Connecticut DOT right of way. So there's no work that's proposed on private property. The closest that we come to that is the removal of the signs that are in the way of the sidewalk that are are within the state right of way. Those signs will be removed and turned over to the owners.
What about all the vegetation?
Yep, that's all clearing and grubbing, but that's all within the state right of way. So any vegetation that is in the way of the sidewalk will just be removed and disposed of. The design and the intent was, at the request of DOT, the existing curb line on Shore Road will remain. No new curbing will be installed, with the exception of very minor curbing work at the various crossings, Cross Lane.
Well, aren't there a number? Teddy Pizza has a number of curb cuts, let's say, and some of the owners along there, they go through a curb. There might be an apron of some sort. Does that stuff have to get yanked and become curbed or what?
We are absolutely installing new curbing in some of the, for example, Pizza Plus was one that jumped out with just a wide open parking lot. DOT wants to control those, so there is new islands going in to better define the inward and outward flow of traffic. All that work is on the state right of way because the right of way is so large. So it in a sense, it kind of makes it easier. Down by Teddy's, it's actually not really as bad as it stands under the existing condition. I'm actually just looking at the plans now. Whoops. Just a big file.
So most expense will be on the cost of the sidewalk with related curbing and grubbing and all that. It's not so much work behind the sidewalk.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Much of this conversation may be moot once we determine whether we're dealing with a prevailing wage or not.
Oh, I know, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's a
where we're
good point,
going here.
Frank.
So we really can't, I don't see how we can even come up with a reasonable, educated guess on what a deduct would be until we determine what our cost factors are.
Well, Kurt will still be able to give us the municipal grant requirements or that, the survey and all that stuff. Yeah, we don't know the rest of it really.
And what I can do is break up the cost. Once I have the total, I can break it up by segment so we can have that subsequent discussion.
So
If
we
you
can know
recall,
what a foot of sidewalk's going to cost us on Hartford Avenue, what a foot of sidewalk's going to cost us on Shore Road, on a non-prevailing wage basis and on a prevailing wage basis. We can make a reasonable discussion, have a reasonable discussion at that point in time, if we need a deduct and what deducts should we be looking at.
Yep. And if you recall, we had a spreadsheet where we talked about the linear foot costs and we were kind of running some ballpark numbers. We'll now be able to refine those numbers. It'll be interesting to see how close we get. I think we had said it was something like $200 a foot, but we'll be able to use the final cost data. We have the distances, we can recalculate those numbers.
We also can even look at the contractor in place numbers too, because they have concrete in place for X numbers of dollars a square foot. So those are numbers that we know at minimum we can get with just a stroke of a pen if a DOT would allow it. So we don't know that yet either. So there's three different variables going on here that we have no control over at this point. We need more answers.
Well, certainly on Hartford Ave, we need the private property work number.
Most definitely.
Yep, and that's in the works now, and I have an example of that I'll Mary Jo, just let me know when at the appropriate time tonight to show you.
I'm the only one that hasn't chimed in yet regarding,
Please,
deducts,
Eric.
but I'll just put my 2 cents in, and I agree with everyone. Basically what Frank said. If we get to that point, going west certainly would be the priority, and I would limit the amount of deducts that we have because I think it just opens up the bidding process of, well, they only have 400,000. Hartford Avenue is now going to be 398,000 because you want to deduct all that other stuff out. So, but we don't know until we know the prevailing wage question. But I would say, west of Hartford Avenue is the priority as opposed to going east towards the police station.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And Jim, Jim already chimed in. So we've heard from everybody on that. And I wanted to just address that again, Frank, about the vendor in place. In the guidelines, when I went back to look at everything, the municipality, we're allowed to use the state vendor in place contract to undertake the construction. And then it shows information on vendor in place to be found on the DAS website, which is why I thought they were the same thing.
So we may have a really good, really solid cost basis very shortly. Better Place is already on a unit-based pricing. We know what the units are. We either look at that and decide whether that's our most cost-effective approach, or go off a lump sum bid, or do both and determine which one's going to be most cost-effective. But at minimum, we would know based on our unit basing and a vendor in place costing what the project would cost.
Yeah, so I guess when Kurt comes back from his request, that can be confirmed. Guidelines say that we can, so. Okay. All right, I appreciate, I would like to propose something since it's been 2 hours.
Yeah.
We need to chop off a few little things here and maybe move it to another meeting. With your, I know it's a special meeting, you can't, but I don't think that necessarily means you can't do it next meeting. We're not adding anything to our agenda. How does that feel to anybody? Because it's 2 hours.
Yeah, I have to pull the trigger on my time here real shortly. Should have been
So-
15 minutes ago.
I think we all feel that way. Is there, I'm just gonna jump down. Is there anybody from the public here who would like to speak? The only one I see here is the reporter. Kate, do you have any questions? Okay.
She's muted. I don't know if she's.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Could you just go back over what the problem is with the prevailing wage? Is it because of if it's completely new construction, then you're not subject to prevailing wage, but if it's somehow kind of reconstruction, then you are? Is that the way I should understand it?
Yeah, in very broad terms, that's correct. The Department of Labor has said that prevailing wage will be required for new construction at $1 million. Our construction project is new construction. It's 400,000. So we have felt all along that we're not going to be subject to prevailing wage.
Okay, and so it should be over $1 million. It should be over $1 million for the prevailing wage.
For new construction, for renovation work, it's 100,000.
Aha, okay, I understand. Okay, so because you were talking about the interpretation of that. Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to propose that put off our discussion. It's very important on when we're going to do our community outreach. I know Kurt had some suggestions on our graph on his schedule, but I'm hoping that we can put our look at everything we have to do and where we're at, and come to our next meeting with a better finalization. The fact is, we're going to have to be WebEx, so our worry about people going away after Columbus Day is kind of not necessary, as long as they can join us on WebEx. So I'm hoping we can come up with some dates at our next meeting and have an earlier meeting than we've had. Is that okay with everybody? Also at that meeting, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll also talk about letters that we can put out to the public as well as our WebEx meeting. And then Kurt's going to eventually produce the graphics that we'll have at the town hall for people to look at. I was wondering if the group would like to try and get together next week. Tim has told me we may have to do a meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd. That was originally going to propose that. Would Thursday, the 24th work for people?
What time would that be?
I'm open.
Earlier the better is for me
Oh.
personally.
Okay.
You want to do 10 o'clock in the morning? Does 10 o'clock in the morning work for everybody?
It
That
does,
works for me.
That way, Jim, you could be part of it for the entire meeting.
Yeah, right.
he did really well.
Yeah,
How
but
does
we're
that
gonna
work?
have to, we got to be done by noon. These day meetings are killing me, so.
Well, we haven't met for a month, so I'm sorry. Practically a month. Eric, does that work for you?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll set that up. Is that okay for you, Kurt?
It is, yes.
Thank you, Tim?
Yeah, the 24th at 10.
Yep, thank you. I'm also going to propose, does anyone have any issues with the minutes from August 12th and August 15th? If you do, I'm going to propose we put them off. If everybody's read them and is okay, we could go to approval. Sounds like we might go to approval.
I have to abstain. I wasn't at the Hartford Avenue meeting with the homeowners.
Yeah. And so Eric and Frank and I were at that meeting. So
What was the date on that one?
August 15th.
I motioned that we approve the minutes for August 15th meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you, Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. August 12th is our last large group meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for the August 12th meeting.
Thank you, Eric.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Frank. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, too. No public comment. And I will need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, Eric. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thank
See you next week.
Thank you.
See you
Salute.
next week.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.